Okay, well, we may sort of be off the pace a little when it comes to the sprint stars, but give us a wee bit of track in front of us, and the New Zealand old, tried and trusted staying breed usually starts kicking some goals or certainly gets some traction, and that was the case yesterday in the Group 1 $750,000 Metropolitan Handicap with Patrick Aaron, the Otago wonder horse, I suppose he's going to be called now, and possibly the replacement for Chris Waller in terms of who shot the barmer, just digging up in behind them, Mick, in what was a sort of almost a predicted sort of win. He just came to this nicely, didn't he?
Well, $16 on the tote seems huge when you consider Chris was quite bullish before the race. Now, the Metrop may not be everybody's cup of tea these days, but what a great win for White Robe Lodge and for the South, of course, named after the late owner, Patrick Aaron Smith. And you know, we do hear a lot coming out about the big money that comes for the sales for the Australian horses, and also the big money spent in Europe trying to get stayers for races like the Melbourne Cup. But when you consider what the old New Zealand breed, and this one's by Gallant Guru, does, you have Who Shot the Barman in recent years, of course, won the Sydney Cup this year, beating Cicada, so 2 New Zealand breeds there. This horse yesterday, a couple of years ago, Prince of Penzance. Sometimes, Hayden, it's the old tough dog for the hard road, and look, this horse now is a Melbourne Cup horse.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned just then about going to Europe to find some good old tough stayers. Maybe you might get a cheaper version then down in South Island. There's some really good tough ones down there from White Robe Lodge.
Well, Gallant Guru, I mean, if you said to most people at Sydney yesterday, the breeding buffs, oh, how many Gallant Gurus have you got? They wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Well, Who Shot the Barman's by Yaneman Vital, of course, and just looking at Chris Waller and his reaction after the race yesterday, he was quite chuffed, I think, about pulling off this project.
He was sent over to me from New Zealand by the owners, which firstly we're grateful of, but I could just see in him, obviously like the barman who we've had from New Zealand as well, and they're just tough horses. So I knew we had to get him up to a suitable distance. I wanted to make sure we still kept him fresh, and I'm pleased we did, because that last 600 time was amazing. So yeah, he's a horse we're proud of, and yeah, it's a pretty special win.
Well, may be around as long as the barman is.
He's got a long way to go then, hasn't he? A lot of time.
Another 10 years?
Yeah, might end up being a crowd favourite. Great for Corey Brown. He's been a great supporter of me for a long time, and doesn't get enough opportunities as he deserves from our stable, because we've got so many good riders, but very grateful that he took the ride, made the effort to ride the weight, and he's a great rider.
Well, what do you think you'll do with Patrick Aaron now?
I think, I'm not sure, maybe look at something bigger. Obviously got the St Ledger here in 2 weeks, and obviously you got the Cups in Melbourne, so I think 2 miles is really going to suit him. That's when he'll really hit his peak. So I think we'll be having a good look at the first Tuesday in November and working back from that.
So I think he was 105th in the order of merit in terms of a start in the Melbourne Cup, Patrick Aaron, but I guess he will have jumped up the rankings a wee bit after that $750,000 win yesterday. So from Riverton Cup success to Randwick, who'd have thought, although he was no slug in New Zealand, it must be.
No, and he got up in the weights too quickly for his own good. He ended up carrying 60 kilos in a Wellington Cup and got to the farcical stage where they had to send him overseas. And you can make what you want of those 60 kilo top weights in some of our handicaps, but not many horses seem to win when they do have to carry them. Hayden, you obviously being a CD boy, rode a couple of horses for Chris Waller back in the day. Was there any indication back when Chris was starting out that he was going to become this sort of juggernaut?
Gee, that's a few moons ago now, but I think Chris's dedication back then when he was foreman for Paddy Busuttin and Foxton, he was pretty precise and picky on what he wanted and wanted to do. And I think when he made that shift to go to Australia, he jumped the ditch and made a good go of it. I congratulate him where he's come from.
You can see that pride in his voice, knowing this is a New Zealand horse and a New Zealand-owned horse.
He loved the opportunity.
You can see that real Kiwi-ness in him, and I think it's cool that he hasn't become all Sydney-ish with all the success.
And I think they were talking about Who Shot the Barman there yesterday, and whether this fella's going to be the replacement. I think he's quite looking forward to racing Patrick Aaron right through to being a 10-year-old in the staying ranks in Australia. We've got the sprinters coming up, but let's go to the feature race on the card yesterday at Randwick. It was the $1 Million Epsom, and what a story this is. The man who's probably been in front of Hartnell more often than not, that we were talking about Chris Waller as the pinch hitter for Chris Waller, gets on the opposition in Hartnell and delivers.
Well, here he is coming wide in the blue, so this is in the Godolphin blue. You don't often see Huey Bowman riding, and the grey, DiGiardino, hits the lead for James McDonald, and I thought it was home here, but this is a remarkable story because Hartnell has tended to be a horse who Hugh Bowman has been the nemesis for. Obviously via Winks last year in the race we showed you before. Bonnevale won the Underwood, and that was always Hugh Bowman beating Hartnell. Here he is getting on Hartnell because he couldn't make the weight for Unforgotten, and he's done the job, there, Hayden, and what a remarkable horse. Won over 2 miles in Wales as a 3-year-old, started favourite in the Melbourne Cup 2 years ago. Here he is winning the Epsom.
Very good training effort, very, very good. I mean, you're saying about Hugh Bowman being on Winks and beating Hartnell just beforehand. Well, Hartnell's run second to Hartnell
To Winks,
four times. Sorry, I'm getting too mixed up. Yeah, 4 times to run second to Winks. So for Huey to jump on Hartnell and win yesterday, it's a big turnaround.
And the merry-go-round for jockeys, of course, J-Mac rode Hartnell in the Melbourne Cup, and it was favourite for the Melbourne Cup, and here he is getting beaten by it yesterday. When that happens to you as a jockey, do you sort of go, oh, well, you're my old mate, Hartnell, I don't mind you beating me, or once you get off them, is it enemies?
Oh, it's enemies, but deep down you do feel that, it's nice to see that horse win. I mean, I know James would have been gutted that Hartnell, that he used to ride once beforehand, has beaten him in that type of race, but I know that James would, because Hartnell's a crowd favourite, he would have loved that horse winning.
Super training performance by James Cummings, because he did mention at the beginning of the season, just when Hartnell got started, that he was deliberately going to keep him for the 1600 metre races, and that sort of the 1800 metres, the 2000 metre trips of the Cox Plate, etc., were just a bit too far for him, and he's basically pulled off the biggest mile race in the spring at Randwick yesterday. Well, Aussie's big banger sprinters were doing the rounds over the weekend with 2 warm-ups, if you like, for the Everest, and yesterday at Randwick, well, they were low-flying. Red Zell, the favourite for the Everest, the favourite for everything, probably the fastest horse in Australia, hit the turbos early on, and they broke 1.8 for the first time ever, they were saying yesterday at Randwick.
Yeah, track records in both the Epsom and in this race, of course, so breaking 1.8 for 1200 metres. Hard to know what to make of this form because Red Zell, as we know, is the defending champion, and Trapeze Artist was here, so most of the favourites were here. But the Freedman horses really stood up. Santa Ana Lane and Shoals, in her time, who's had a stable change, obviously, recently with the controversy around her, also good. Trapeze Artist, the big, bold $50 million horse with the white blaze on the outside, I thought looked a touch one-paced considering they'd gone quick enough for the swoopers to get into the race. Shoals down the outside, very, very good. Santa Ana Lane looks the part, and Red Zell, you would have to say, even along with that speed, he was pretty disappointing. Here's the major lead-up to the Everest.
Santa Ana Lane goes home best. Well, what a horse. Santa Ana Lane got up on the post to beat.
So maybe they just ran a wee bit too fast in front. A bit of a sort of table-turning race that yesterday with the back runners getting up and Shoals and the eventual winner obviously just being a wee bit disappointing in the last couple of starts, toppling Red Zell and Trapeze Artist, the boom horses in terms of sprinters at Randwick yesterday. Of course, on Friday night at Moonee Valley, the sort of Victorian swathe was sort of having their crack at the Moya Stakes, and they're pretty fussy, these sprinters, aren't they? They obviously we had Nature Strip, which was potted as the fastest horse in Australia, and also bore the muscle there getting towards the front. But these horses too, as fast as they are, just had to work far too hard in that first 300 or 400 metres, didn't they? And then they quit.
He's pushing here, isn't he?
Yeah.
Nature Strip, and Aidan, we'll bring you in here. Like, he's really working here. When you're on one and you're working that hard, do you have the indication, okay, I've gone too quick here? Because you've got no choice, but do you know?
You do know. You do know on the first 200 or 300 metres when you've drawn wide and you've just got to push that a little bit further to cross one other runner or get to the rail just to save a little bit of ground. You do know in the back of your mind that shit, am I going to get to the line?
They're a different breed, aren't they? Because this is only 1,000 metres and they're gone by home time, aren't they?
Yeah,
these horses?
yeah. Well, horses can run one breath on 800 metres, so if they've gone too hard early, they do need to take a breath somewhere along the way, and if they've gone so hard they can't quite get to that line.
Now, Nature Strip was the ATC, so the host club's own horse for the Everest, and quite clearly he can't start on that. Darren Wheeler said, nope, so we're finished. One would suggest Feodora's going to slot into that spot. That would seem logical. So there's actually 2 slots now still vacant for the Everest. Brave Smash was very good there, and Huey said after the race, awfully hard to beat. That in itself was a good race, and it was fun to watch, but I don't mean to laugh
can't
about
laugh
this.
at this.
We had a conversation last week on the show where I said you would be mad to give your Everest nomination to Chautauqua. Well, Chautauqua agrees with me. Here's Chautauqua at the trials between races. He's the Graham Barrier 4 and... nah.
Hayden, horses are smarter than we think.
Definitely.
What's he thinking here?
He's
'Cause
thinking, he's thinking I've had enough.
So what's the difference between turning up at Moonee Valley on Friday night and doing this, and jumping out relentlessly at between races and what have you with no crowd around? He just knows it's race time, and I don't want
The horses do know, and like you said, he's turned up race day, the big crowd, the speakers are going, he knows where he is, he's had a situation beforehand that he's been frightened in, he don't want to jump out.
Frightened?
He doesn't appear to be sore, and obviously they would know if he was sore at his track work. Do you think, and as best you can play amateur psychiatrist about this, he just doesn't want to be there?
Yeah. Tommy Berry said yesterday that he knew around behind the gates that something wasn't quite right.
Have you been in that situation where you've been on a horse going to the gates and you thought, well, this isn't going to work, he doesn't want to be here?
Yeah, you can do. You can feel it. Many a time even on a long shot horse or a rough one, you get round to such a really nice prelim, you get round the gates, you get that gut feeling, I think this horse will go good today. Even though it's long in the odds and it's down in the book or might be on the ballot, you just get that feeling, this horse feels something there that's going to go good, and they can come out and win. But also the other way around, you'll be on a favourite and it's playing up, it doesn't want to go on the gates, they're just doing niggly little things that you get the feeling, no, it's not on today.
Not jumping at all is quite neurotic, isn't it? I mean, he could just jump out and follow them around and not try.
If it was a one-off, fair enough, but he's become habit, and habits are hard to break with horses.
That brings into question the whip. Now, you obviously have one, and you are allowed to hit the horse behind the saddle with it. Would that just not work? Would he just be like, I'm not interested? Because does it not affect them enough that if you gave him a real belt behind the arse on that one, he would take off out of the gates? Because that would seem to be the thing.
No, it would work the opposite. A lot of majority of horses don't like the whip.
Yeah.
They will run from it, and there is a handful that need it, but there are more that don't. So I would say with that type of horse, the way he's acting, if you gave him one with a stick, he wouldn't like it.
I reckon that's the second worst one I've seen. You may not remember this, and I can't remember the horse's name. Remember Lance O'Sullivan went on the track for a Melbourne Cup once, and he got out onto the track, and then the horse just stood there.
Yeah.
And wouldn't move.
Yeah,
That's worse.
Pick this moment.
Yeah.
We've got some more greys coming up, but we thought we might go to this break with some of the greatest hits of what was truly a great sprinter.
Aero Velocity put his head in front from Paedophobia. Strathmore, then Not Listening to Me. Lucky Bubbles. Chautauqua is winding up. Aero Velocity joined by Strathmore. Lucky Bubbles. Chautauqua still coming. Going to the lead, Lucky Bubbles. Chautauqua, here he comes. The Thunder down under. Chautauqua race to the lead. What a champion. Chautauqua beat Lucky Bubbles.
Stride for stride, Phil Swoop, Russian Revolution. English comes off heels, and the mare is starting to let down. English goes after Phil Swoop. Russian Revolution's run his race further back to Voodoo Lad. It's English and Phil Swoop fighting it out. Chautauqua very late. It's English a half length in front. Can he do it? Chautauqua, he's flying. Yes, there's history. Chautauqua makes it 3 in a row. That is unbelievable.